Welcome back to Philosophy 1101, Problems of Philosophy here at the University of Connecticut. Today will be our third and final discussion of topics in the philosophy of religion that we've discussed under the rubric of the greatest conceivable being. Thus far, we've talked about arguments that try to show, using either theoretical or practical rationality, that a GCB, a greatest conceivable being, does exist. Today, I want to discuss arguments that purport to show that such a GCB does not exist. These are known, therefore, as atheological arguments, and there are two that I'll be discussing today. One is known as the paradox of the stone. The other one is known as the problem of evil. I'm guessing that you've heard one or both of these in one form or another in your life thus far. So first, the paradox of the stone. The intuitive idea is something like the following. One might ask the following question: can an omnipotent being, in particular a type of omnipotent being known as the GCB, make a stone that it's in principle impossible to lift? The idea behind this question is that perhaps there's something implicitly contradictory or incoherent in the idea of a GCB, in particular a being that is omnipotent, and if so, then belief in such a thing would somehow be confused. So the question is, can a GCB make a stone that's in principle impossible to lift? Well, it would seem that either the GCB can or the GCB can't make such a stone. So let's reason by either side of that disjunction. The statement either A or B is known as a disjunction. We're going to consider both sides and see what happens. The first side, let's suppose that the GCB can make such a stone, that is, an unliftable stone. Then there's going to be a limitation on the GCB's power. That is, there'll be one thing that the GCB can't do, namely make and lift that stone. On the other hand, if the GCB can't make an unliftable stone, then there's something else that the GCB can't do, namely make that stone. So either way, there's a limitation on the GCB's power. Either on the first side, the GCB is not unable to make and lift a particular type of stone, or on the other side, the GCB is unable to make that type of stone. In either case, there's a limitation on the power of the GCB. So omnipotence looks like it's either not well defined or somehow confused or in need of clarification. So let's go back for a moment, step back for a moment, and think about what omnipotence could possibly be. I want to suggest that it could either mean one of two things. Omnipotence could either mean having the power to do anything at all, no matter what, or it could mean something more modest, that is, in particular, having the power to do anything that it is possible to do. Now, the latter, having the power to do anything that it's possible to do, is not circular or banal or trivial. After all, having the power to do anything that it's possible to do is still very, very impressive. It still means that one can fly by flapping one's arms, and perhaps it means one can travel at the speed of light. Those are both things that I certainly can't do, and that I suspect you're unable to do as well. So having the power to do anything that it's possible to do is still quite a great deal of power. But having the power to do anything at all, the first, much stronger definition of omnipotence, might give us pause. That is to say, we might wonder whether that really makes sense. After all, if you expect omnipotence to imply the idea that you can do anything at all no matter what, then that also means doing things that we otherwise would have thought to be impossible. So, for example, if you expect omnipotence to imply the possibility that you could do anything at all, then you'd expect that an omnipotent being could, for example, take two things, add two more to that number, and end up with 5 things. But that seems to violate the laws of mathematics. Or having the power to do anything at all would seem to imply the ability to both create something and fail to bring it into existence. That seems contradictory. And it seems strange to say, hey, the problem with the GCB on your definition of omnipotence is that the GCB is unable to do something that's incoherent. That is, that would produce an inconsistency, for example. That seems like an implausible expectation for what omnipotence should actually come to. So I want to suggest that one response to the paradox of the stone is not to say, rather than saying the idea of the GCB is incoherent, subtly inconsistent, for example, let's suppose instead that the paradox of the stone teaches us that really we need to clarify and make a bit more modest our conception of what omnipotence actually comes to. Maybe omnipotence is just a matter of doing whatever it's possible to do, and that's still a pretty big deal. So I want to suggest that one way of responding to the paradox of the stone is something that might fall into the slogan of be kind to your GCB. Being able to do anything that it's possible to do is still a pretty great thing, greater than you or I think, are able to do, and still something that would merit anybody's respect. And in this more modest conception of omnipotence, the GCB, nevertheless, does have limitations. The GCB cannot take two things, add two more, and end up with 5, unless the GCB subtly or illicitly sticks one more thing into the collection. The GCB, that is limited by the facts of mathematics. Mathematics, that is not a human creation, it's something that we discover, and so too the GCB discovers the facts, the truths of mathematics, and maybe also realizes the truths of whatever is logically possible. Many contemporary theists and theologians will say that on this more modest conception of being able to do whatever it's possible to do as a definition of omnipotence, the GCB still merits our worship and awe. So what I want to suggest then is that one conception of the GCB as being omnipotent, this more modest conception, is perhaps a solution to the problem of the paradox of the stone, one that might allow a theist to say, no, this paradox of the stone allows us to clarify our conception of what omnipotence actually comes to, but it does not by itself require us to give up the idea of belief in a GCB. It just helps us get clear on what we're actually believing when we hold on to such a thing.